When the attorney told me I'd inherited over $5 million, my first thought was, finally, I can help my daughter. I rushed downstairs to tell her the news, but I froze on the stairs, because I heard her and her husband planning to have me committed, sell my house, and take all the money. They did not know I could hear every single word. Welcome to the She Defied Age channel. Before we continue, please let us know in the comments section which region you are connecting from. We genuinely value this information. We wish you a deeply engaging experience with this remarkable narrative that is about to unfold. Chapter 1. The letter. The envelope arrived on a Wednesday afternoon in late September. I was reorganizing my kitchen cabinets, sorting through mismatched containers that had accumulated over 3 decades of marriage and 7 years of widowhood. The return address caught my attention immediately. Whitmore and Associates, estate planning attorneys, Phoenix, Arizona. My hands trembled slightly as I slid a finger under the flap and opened it. Inside was a single sheet of heavy cream paper that felt oddly cold to the touch. Dear Mrs. Catherine Reynolds, it began, this letter serves as formal notification that you have been named primary beneficiary in the last will and testament of Mr. Thomas Edwin Clark, deceased August 19th of this year. I had to read that sentence twice before the name truly registered in my mind. Uncle Tommy, my mother's brother, the man who had never married, never had children of his own, but had remembered my birthday without fail for 56 years. The man I had visited every month for the past 18 months as his health deteriorated, driving 3 hours each way from Tucson to his assisted living facility in Scottsdale. The familiarity of his name made the formal language feel surreal. The letter continued with dense, careful phrasing I had to read 3 times to understand. The estate includes residential real property located in Scottsdale, Phoenix, and Flagstaff, as well as commercial holdings in Tempe. Total estimated valuation exceeds $5.2 million. The number sat there on the page, enormous and incomprehensible, like it had wandered in from someone else's life. I sank down into a chair at my oak kitchen table, the same table where Stephen and I had eaten breakfast together for 24 years before his aneurysm took him at 51. $5.2 million. Uncle Tommy had been a high school mathematics teacher who drove the same Buick for 15 years and wore shirts until the collars frayed. Wealth had never been part of how I imagined him. The grief hit me then, sudden and overwhelming, like a wave I had been holding back without realizing it. He had been gone since August 19th, 6 full weeks, and no one had told me. I had been calling his facility, leaving polite messages, assuming he was simply too weak to come to the phone. All that time he had already passed from this world without my knowing. I wept there in my kitchen, the late afternoon sun slanting across the table, my tears sliding onto the letter I could barely read. I cried for Uncle Tommy, for his quiet kindness and gentle humor, and for the fact that I had not been there to hold his hand one last time. I cried for the missed goodbye, for the empty Thursday evenings when I had waited for a call that would never come. When the storm finally passed, I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand and forced myself to read the letter again, this time more slowly. The instructions about contacting the firm, the mention of probate proceedings, the careful legal language all blurred around the single impossible phrase, primary beneficiary. My mind struggled to wrap itself around what that actually meant for my life. My first coherent thought was not about myself at all. It was about Amanda, my daughter, my only child, 31 years old, who had moved back in with me 7 months earlier. She and her husband Derek had lost their small graphic design business when their largest client unexpectedly declared bankruptcy, and the collapse had dragged them down with it. Savings had vanished, credit cards had swollen to $32,000 in debt, and they had been forced to give up their apartment. I had opened my door to them without a second's hesitation, giving them the guest bedroom, rearranging closets, adjusting my solitude to accommodate their presence. That is what mothers do. We expand to make room, even when we think we have no space left. Now, for the first time, I could imagine helping them in a way that went beyond casseroles and a spare room. I could picture erasing that debt completely, giving them breathing room, maybe even helping them restart their business properly, or put a down payment on a home of their own. The idea brought a flicker of something close to joy into the rawness of my grief. Still clutching the letter, I stood and walked toward the living room, where I could hear the low murmur of their voices over the faint sound of the television. Amanda and Derek were talking quietly. I should have called out, should have announced my presence, but something in Derek's tone made me stop just short of the doorway, in the shadowed hallway where they could not see me. His voice carried an edge I had not heard before, a sharpness that cut through the familiar hum of the house. Amanda, this cannot continue indefinitely, he was saying. 7 months of living with your mother. 7 months of her hovering, of listening to her talk about her church friends and her garden and her memories of your father. The words stung even before their meaning fully sank in. I am aware of that, Derek, Amanda replied, her voice sounding thin and tired. But what exactly do you suggest we do? We are still $32,000 in debt. We cannot just wish that away. I stood very still, my palm pressed against the cool drywall, my own home suddenly feeling like a place I was trespassing in rather than the one I owned and maintained. That is precisely my point, Derek said. This house is worth at least $420,000 in this market, maybe more. Your mother is 56, widowed, living alone. Why does one person need 3 bedrooms and a yard she can barely keep up with? His tone was reasonable on the surface, but underneath I heard calculation, a cold arithmetic that did not include me as a person. Where would she go? Amanda asked after a pause. There was a thread of alarm in her voice that both comforted and frightened me. Derek, think about it rationally. I am thinking rationally, he insisted. My sister works at Desert Vista Senior Community. She says they have availability right now. It is a quality facility. They have medical staff, social programs, meal service. Your mother would have people her own age around her, Derek continued, warming to his argument. She would have structure, activities, supervision. She would not be here alone all day while we are out trying to fix our lives. My breath caught somewhere between my ribs. My life was suddenly an inconvenience to be organized around, rather than something of value in itself. You are suggesting we put my mother in a senior home, Amanda said, her voice barely above a whisper. It is not a nursing home, Derek argued. It is independent senior living. And frankly, is it not sad that she is here alone every day? At least there she would have companionship. Her pension from the school district would cover the monthly fees. We sell this house, eliminate our debt, buy our own place. Everyone benefits. My mother would never agree to it, Amanda said after a moment. I clung to that sentence as if it were a life raft. Then we do not ask for her agreement, Derek replied, and now his voice had hardened in a way that made my blood run cold. We pursue legal guardianship. You are her only child. That gives you standing to file. With proper medical documentation stating she has unmanaged health conditions, her blood pressure, that anxiety she had after your father died, he went on, a judge would grant it, especially if we emphasize that she lives alone and may not be making sound decisions anymore. Each word landed like a small, precise blow, driving the air out of my lungs. She does not have an anxiety disorder, Derek. She had grief counseling, Amanda protested, but the protest sounded weak, half-hearted. But she does take medications for both conditions, he countered smoothly. We emphasize the prescriptions, mention any forgetfulness or confusion. My sister knows an attorney who specializes in these cases. He has a very high success rate. This is done all the time. I pressed my hand harder against the wall to keep my balance. Let me think about this, Amanda said finally, her voice uncertain. There is nothing to think about, Derek snapped, impatience leaking through. Either we take action or we remain trapped here, living with your mother indefinitely. And she is not going to live forever anyway. When she dies, you inherit this place regardless. We are simply accelerating the timeline and accessing the equity now, when we actually need it. I backed away from the doorway as quietly as I could, instincts honed by decades of moving silently around sleeping children guiding my steps. My heart hammered in my chest, my ears burning with what I had heard. I returned to my kitchen, sat down mechanically, and stared at the letter from the attorneys that minutes before had seemed like a miracle and now felt like a shield I might desperately need. 33 years of teaching, 24 years of marriage, 7 years of widowhood, 7 months of cooking their meals, and doing their laundry and making space in my home. And my daughter, my only child, was planning with her husband to have me declared incompetent, to take my home, to lock me away in a place others had chosen for me. I allowed myself exactly 5 minutes to cry. I glanced at the clock on the wall and watched the second hand go around as hot tears slipped down my face. When the time had passed, I wiped my eyes, inhaled slowly, and picked up the phone. My fingers still shook, but they knew what they were doing as I began to dial the numbers that came to mind. Chapter 2. Sanctuary. I did not tell Amanda or Derek where I was going. 15 minutes later, I walked through the living room with my purse over my shoulder and my car keys in hand. They were seated on my sofa, watching some show, their expressions relaxed, as if they had not just spent half an hour planning how to dismantle my life. Going somewhere, Mom? Amanda asked, glancing up from her phone. Her tone was casual, affectionate even, as if we were still sharing the same reality. Just out for a while, I replied, hearing how calm I sounded. Some things I need to take care of. 33 years of managing classrooms full of children and anxious parents had taught me how to keep my voice steady under pressure. Can you stop by the store? Derek added without looking away from the screen. We out of coffee. Of course, I said automatically. I stepped outside, closed the front door behind me, and let the warm Tucson air wrap around me like a blanket. For a brief second, I leaned against the door, gathering myself before walking down the path to my car. I got into my 2014 Toyota Camry, the car I had babied through oil changes and tire rotations, and started the engine. I did not drive to the store. I pointed the car north towards Sedona, and merged onto the highway with the same firm decisiveness with which I had once broken up playground fights. I needed someone who knew me before I was just mom, and widow, and problem to be solved. Patricia Chan had been my closest friend for 42 years. We had met in our early 20s, two nervous student teachers trying not to cry in the staff bathroom after chaotic days. We had held each other as hands through marriages, miscarriages, promotions, and funerals. After Stephen died, Patricia had been the one who came over every week, bringing food I could not taste and presents I desperately needed. The drive to Sedona took 2 hours and 20 minutes. I did not turn on the radio. I drove in silence, the desert landscape rolling by in muted browns and reds, my hands gripping the steering wheel hard enough to make my knuckles ache. I counted mile markers and exit signs, using them as anchors to keep my thoughts from spinning out. Patricia's home was a beautiful adobe-style house nested against the red rocks, with rough-hewn beams and large windows that drank in the sky. Her garden was full of native plants, agave and yucca and wildflowers, all thriving in the dry air. I walked up the stone path to her front door and knocked, suddenly afraid that if she did not answer, the thin calm I had built would crack wide open. She opened the door within seconds, as if she had been standing on the other side waiting. One look at my face and she stepped aside without a word. "Catherine," she said quietly, "come in right now." The concern in her voice nearly undid me. I stepped inside, feeling the familiar coolness of her tiled floor under my feet, and exhaled a breath I had not realized I was holding. We sat in her living room, the same room where Stephen and I had celebrated New Year's Eve 8 years earlier, when we still believed we had decades ahead of us. Patricia went to the kitchen and returned with 2 tall glasses of iced tea, condensation already forming on the sides. She did not ask if I wanted any. She knew that the act of handing it to me would steady my shaking hands. "Talk to me," she said, settling into the armchair opposite mine. Her eyes stayed on my face, open and patient. And I told her. Once I began, the words would not stop. I described the letter, the $5.2 million, the realization that Uncle Tommy had been gone for 6 weeks without my knowing. I recounted the conversation I had overheard, every sentence etched into my memory like a burn mark. By the time I reached the part about guardianship and Desert Vista, my voice was coming in gasps. "She is my daughter, Patricia," I choked out. "My baby. I gave up everything for her. When Stephen died and the life insurance barely covered the funeral and 6 months of bills, I worked summer school 5 years straight so she could finish university without loans. I drove a car with a broken air conditioner for 8 years, so she could have a reliable vehicle when she graduated," I continued, tears streaming. I took on extra tutoring jobs so she could have the wedding she dreamed of. I cut coupons and skipped haircuts and pretended not to see the cracks in the walls, so she could feel secure. The litany of sacrifices spilled out of me unfiltered. And now she is planning to have me declared incompetent. I whispered, my voice raw. So she can take my house. Like I am already gone. Like I am already dead. Saying it aloud made the betrayal feel both more real and more incomprehensible. I clutched the glass of iced tea so tightly my fingers hurt, needing the physical sensation to anchor me. Patricia reached across the space between our chairs and took both my hands in hers. Her grip was firm, warm, completely steady. "Catherine Reynolds," she said, each syllable clear. "You listen to me right now. You are not dead. You are not incompetent. You are a woman who taught children for 33 years. Who raised a daughter after her father died suddenly. Who cared for an uncle when he had no one else. Then why is she doing this?" I sobbed. The question had been echoing in my head since I left the house. "Because some people," Patricia said quietly, "make terrible choices when they are desperate and afraid. Because money and fear and pressure can twist their judgment. It does not excuse what she is planning, but it may explain the story she is telling herself." She squeezed my hands. "What do you want to do?" she asked, not suggesting, not pushing, just inviting me to name something that still belonged to me. "I do not know," I admitted. I just could not hold it alone anymore. I needed someone to know. Someone who would not call me dramatic or ungrateful or paranoid. My voice shook, but there was relief in finally saying it aloud. "You are doing exactly what you should be doing," Patricia said. She stood and crossed to the old oak desk against the wall, opened a drawer, and pulled out a small stack of business cards. After flipping through them, she selected one and brought it to me. "This is Margaret Lindsay, best estate attorney in northern Arizona. She helped Richard and me set up our trust last year. Call her first thing tomorrow morning. Tell her everything." I took the card with trembling fingers and read the neat black print. The name felt solid, like something I could hold on to. "And Catherine," Patricia added, her eyes soft but her voice unyielding. "You do not owe Amanda your life. Not after what she is planning. You hear me? You owe her love, yes. But not your home, not your freedom, not your sanity." I nodded, though somewhere deep inside, a small, stubborn voice still whispered, "But she is my daughter." I stayed with Patricia and her husband Richard for 5 hours. They fed me dinner, roasted chicken, vegetables, homemade bread, that I barely tasted. They let me cry and rage and sit in silence, circling all the stages of grief without naming them. It felt like a funeral for the relationship I thought I had with Amanda. By the time I drove home, the sun was sinking behind the red rocks, painting the sky in streaks of orange and purple. My eyes were swollen, my head ached, and my heart felt bruised. But underneath all of that, something new had settled in me. Not peace, not yet, but clarity. A hard, quiet determination. I had spent my life taking care of others, cleaning up their messes, putting their needs before my own. That pattern ended now. Chapter 3. The Fortress. Thursday morning at 8:30, I sat in a leather chair in Margaret Lindsay's office in Flagstaff, a framed print of desert wildflowers on the wall behind her desk. She was older than I expected, perhaps late 60s, with silver hair cut in a blunt bob and eyes that were clear and assessing. She introduced herself briefly, then invited me to start from the beginning. I told her everything. I began with the letter from Whitmore and Associates and Uncle Tommy's death. I described the surprise of the $5.2 million, the guilt about not knowing he had passed, the drive to Sedona. Then I recounted the conversation I had overheard in my living room, repeating the phrases about guardianship and Desert Vista almost word for word. As I spoke, Margaret typed notes on a slim laptop, pausing occasionally to ask a precise clarifying question. When I finished, my throat dry and my hands clenched in my lap, she leaned back in her chair and regarded me thoughtfully. "Mrs. Reynolds," she said after a moment, "what you are describing constitutes elder financial exploitation and conspiracy to commit fraud. Both are serious offenses under Arizona law." "I do not want my daughter arrested," I said quickly, the words tumbling over each other. "I do not want her going to jail. I just I broke off, searching for the right phrase. I need to protect myself. I need to make sure they cannot do what they are planning. Saying it so plainly made the situation feel even more stark, but there was relief in not softening it. I understand completely, Margaret replied, her tone shifting from analytical to practical. So here is what we are going to do. She turned the laptop slightly so she could type and still look at me. First, the inheritance will be placed in an irrevocable trust, with you as lifetime beneficiary. That means the assets are legally separate from you as an individual, and cannot be seized or redirected without strict conditions. Second, she continued, your house will be transferred into a separate property trust immediately. This will remove it from your personal name and place it under the protection of the trust. Third, we will create a new estate plan, removing your daughter as beneficiary and designating alternate heirs, such as charities or scholarships, according to your wishes. Fourth, Margaret said, ticking the points off on her fingers, we will obtain a comprehensive medical evaluation from a qualified geriatric specialist, establishing your complete cognitive and functional competence. That documentation will be prepared specifically to counter any future guardianship petition. If they attempt to file, we will already have a record showing you are fully capable of managing your own affairs. How long will this take? I asked, feeling both hopeful and overwhelmed. The trusts and property transfers can be drafted and signed by the end of next week, assuming you can review documents promptly, she answered. The medical evaluation will depend on scheduling, but I know Dr. Robert Yamamoto, a respected geriatrician. I can likely get you in to see him tomorrow afternoon. She paused, folded her hands on the desk, and looked at me more gently. Mrs. Reynolds, I need to ask you a difficult question. Beyond legal protection, what outcome do you actually want? Do you want to confront your daughter? Do you want them removed from your home? Do you hope for reconciliation someday? The question pierced through the legal strategies to the raw center of the problem. Images flashed through my mind. Amanda at 4, bringing me dandelions from the yard. Amanda at 13, crying on my shoulder after a boyish cruel comment. Amanda at 24, radiant in her wedding dress, hugging me and whispering, "Thank you for everything, Mom. I want her to understand what she was about to do." I said finally, my voice low. I want her to see it clearly. To really see it. Margaret nodded slowly. Then we protect your assets first, she said. We build the legal walls before we invite confrontation. Once everything is secure and you are legally untouchable, you can decide how to handle the emotional side. On your terms. From a place of safety, not fear. The word untouchable settled over me like a piece of armor I had never imagined needing. By Friday afternoon, everything was in motion. Margaret's staff had already begun drafting the trust documents. She had arranged an appointment for me with Dr. Yamamoto for Friday morning, instructing me to bring a full list of medications and any prior medical records. The efficiency was both dizzying and reassuring. For the first time in days, I felt like there was a path forward. Dr. Yamamoto's office was bright and airy, with cheerful art on the walls and a pot of orchids on the reception desk. He greeted me with a firm handshake and an easy smile. "Mrs. Reynolds," he said, "I understand you here for a comprehensive evaluation." His tone was neutral, professional, but there was a kindness in his eyes that helped me relax a fraction. The evaluation lasted nearly 3 hours. He asked detailed questions about my medical history, current medications, and daily routines. He administered memory tests, had me draw shapes, repeat lists of words, solve simple problems. He checked my reflexes, balance, vision, hearing, and blood pressure. At times I felt like a schoolgirl being tested, at others like a car undergoing a thorough inspection. At the end of the appointment, he closed his file and looked at me with a warm, direct expression. "Mrs. Reynolds," he said, "your cognitive function tests in the superior range for your age group. Your physical health is generally good for someone in their mid-50s, and your blood pressure is well managed with medication. There is absolutely no evidence of any condition that would impair your decision-making capacity." He folded his hands. "My report will state unequivocally that you possess full legal competence. Your attorney will receive it by Monday." I felt my eyes fill with tears, This time not from grief or betrayal but from a small, fierce sense of vindication. It was absurd that I needed a stranger to certify that I still possessed the mind I had been using every day, but I was grateful for his words nonetheless. I drove home from Flagstaff with that small victory warm in my chest like a pocket of sunlight. Legally, I was being wrapped in layers of protection. Trusts, deeds, evaluations, documents. The walls were rising around me, not to imprison me but to shield me from those who should have been my guardians rather than my would-be captors. But emotional safety was another matter entirely. I still had to walk into my house, set my purse on the same hook, stand at the same stove, and sit across from my daughter and her husband at dinner. I had to listen to their ordinary chatter, their questions about my day, and respond as though I did not know what they had planned in my absence. The dissonance of that pretense gnawed at me like a slow, dull ache. Chapter 4. The pretense. Friday evening, I made lasagna. It had been Amanda's favorite since she was 8 years old, when I first let her help layer noodles and sauce in a casserole dish. The smell of garlic and tomato filled the house, pulling old memories of birthday dinners and school celebrations into the present. Underneath, though, everything felt off-kilter, like the furniture had been moved in the dark. Amanda came home from a job interview at a local nonprofit around 5:45, her shoulders slightly hunched with uncertain hope. Derek arrived 10 minutes later, smelling faintly of car exhaust and cologne. We sat down at the dining room table, the same table where I had once spread out math worksheets and spelling lists, guiding Amanda's small fingers across the page. "This smells amazing, Mom," Amanda said, giving me a real smile as she twirled a forkful of pasta. "You always make the best lasagna." The sincerity in her voice hurt more than open cruelty would have. It meant that some part of our old relationship still lived inside her, even as another part had been planning my removal. "Thank you, sweetheart," I replied, passing her the salad bowl. My hands did not shake. Years of hiding my feelings in front of anxious children and suspicious parents had taught me how to keep my expression composed even when my insides were raw. Derek ate quickly, glancing at his phone between bites, his attention never fully resting on the people at the table. "Catherine," he said suddenly, looking up, "Amanda and I were talking earlier. You mentioned your uncle passed away recently. Have you had to deal with his belongings yet?" The question was casual on the surface, but there was a constricted feeling in my chest as I remembered how much he already knew that I had not told him. I had mentioned Uncle Tommy's death to them on Wednesday evening, just after reading the letter. I had said only that he had passed away, and that I would need to handle some estate matters. I had not breathed a word about the properties or the valuation or the $5.2 million. "I have an appointment with his attorney next week," I said carefully now, cutting a piece of lasagna with deliberate precision. "Did he?" Derek paused as if searching for the right phrase. "Did he have much? I mean, you visited him so often. He must have appreciated that." Amanda shot him a quick, warning glance, a flash of discomfort that told me she was not entirely at ease with this line of questioning. It did not erase what I had heard, but it complicated the picture in my mind. "He lived quite simply," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "He was a teacher his whole life. I do not expect there will be much, if that is what you are asking." It was not precisely the truth, but it was not a lie either. I did not know exactly how the estate would settle, only what the preliminary letter had suggested. "Oh no, that is not what I meant at all," Derek said quickly, backpedaling. "I just meant you deserve something for all the care you gave him. All those drives to Scottsdale, all the time you spent. That was a real sacrifice." There was a sheen of politeness over his words like lacquer over wood, but I could see the grain of his real intentions underneath. "I did not do it for an inheritance," I said quietly, setting down my fork. "I did it because he was family." The word hung in the air like smoke, family. It tasted different in my mouth now, edged with questions I had never thought I would need to ask about my own child. Neither of them replied. For a moment, the only sounds were the clink of cutlery and the soft hum of the refrigerator. After dinner, I insisted on washing the dishes alone, letting them drift upstairs together. Through the ceiling I could hear the muffled rise and fall of their voices, sharp at times then quieter, as they argued or plotted or both. I dried the last plate, set it in the cabinet, and stood in the middle of my kitchen, feeling like I was standing in the eye of a storm no one else could see. Saturday morning at 8:15, there was a light knock on my bedroom door. I had been awake for hours, sitting on the edge of the bed fully dressed, my mind looping through conversations that had not yet happened. "Mom, can we talk?" Amanda's voice came through the door, cautious and pleading at once. I took a breath and opened it. She stood in the hallway wearing faded jeans and an old university sweatshirt, her hair pulled back into a loose ponytail. She looked so much like she had at 17 that for a moment my heart twisted. "Of course," I said. "What is it?" She twisted her fingers together, a nervous habit from childhood. "Derek and I have been talking," she began. "We worried about you." "Worried about me?" I echoed, leaning against the doorframe. "Since Uncle Tommy died, you seem stressed," she said. Distant. "And Mom, you're 56 now. Dad's been gone 7 years. You're living alone in this big house." "I am not alone," I reminded her gently. "You and Derek are here." The irony tasted bitter on my tongue. "But we will not be here forever," she said quickly. "Eventually we'll get back on our feet. And then you really will be alone. This house is a lot for one person. The yard, the maintenance, the repairs. And you're on a fixed income now with just your pension. What if something big breaks down? What if you need expensive work done?" Her eyes searched my face as if looking for permission to continue. I studied my daughter carefully. I searched for the little girl who used to crawl into my lap with scraped knees, for the teenager who slid into my bed when storms rattled the windows, for the young woman who cried on my shoulder before walking down the aisle. "Are you suggesting I should sell my house, Amanda?" I asked, keeping my voice even. Her eyes flickered with something. Maybe guilt, maybe relief that I had said it first. "Not sell exactly," she said, "but maybe simplify your life. There are really nice communities now for active seniors. Places where you have people around, activities, healthcare right there. You would not have to worry about anything. They handle meals, housekeeping, everything." "Like Desert Vista Senior Community?" I asked quietly. "Where Derek's sister works." Her face registered surprise, a tiny widening of the eyes before she recovered. "How did you know about that?" she asked. "Derek mentioned it," I lied smoothly. "He said it was a good place." The lie tasted like chalk, but it gave me a small advantage I was not about to surrender. Amanda relaxed a fraction. "Well, yes," she said. "We were thinking maybe this weekend we could drive over there. Just look around. No pressure. Just see what it's like. You might really like it." "And what would happen to this house?" I asked. My question hung between us like a test she did not know how to pass. "Well," she said, twisting her hands again, "we would probably need to sell it. Use that money to pay for the community fees. And anything left over could go into savings for your future medical care. So you secure as you get older." The phrase future medical care slid over me like ice water. It was almost word for word what Derek had said in the living room. "That is very thoughtful of you both," I said, forcing my mouth into something that looked like a faint smile. "Let me think about it." Relief flooded her face so quickly it almost made me dizzy. "Of course," she said. "Take all the time you need. We just want what's best for you. That is all." She stepped forward and hugged me, a brief, awkward embrace that felt like a curtain being pulled over a trapdoor. After she left, I closed my bedroom door and sat on the bed. My hands were steady now. The decision was already forming. I picked up my phone and dialed Margaret's office. When she answered, I did not bother with pleasantries. "They are accelerating their timeline," I said. "Amanda wants me to visit Desert Vista this weekend." "Do not go," Margaret said immediately. "Once you tour a facility with them, it creates the appearance that you were considering it voluntarily. That can strengthen their argument if they petition for guardianship anyway." "What should I do?" I asked. "Tell her you're not interested," Margaret replied. "Be direct. And Catherine's time. Everything is in place. The trusts are finalized. Your house is protected. Your estate plan is complete. You have Dr. Yamamoto's evaluation. You are legally untouchable now." "So I confront them," I said softly, staring at the framed photograph of Stephen and me on our wedding day. Yes, she replied. But on your terms. When you feel ready. I looked around my room at the quilt my mother had sewn, the photo of Amanda in kindergarten, the worn dresser Stephen and I had bought second-hand our first year of marriage. This was my life, built slowly and carefully. I am ready, I said. Chapter 5. The Reckoning. I chose Sunday evening. It felt fitting somehow, that the day many people reserved for reflection and reckoning would become the day I reclaimed my own life. Amanda and Derek had been out all afternoon running errands. I had spent the time preparing with the same focused intensity one had once used to plan parent-teacher conferences. I called Patricia that morning. I need you here, I said simply. She did not ask why. I'll be there by 6, she replied. Knowing she would be in the room with me made the prospect of what I was about to do feel just barely possible. I needed a witness, someone who loved me, someone who would remember the truth if anyone ever tried to rewrite it. At 5:30, I set the dining room table for 4. I took my mother's good china from the cabinet, the set with the tiny blue flowers she had only used on holidays. I laid out cloth napkins, polished silverware, and the crystal water glasses Stephen and I had received as a wedding gift. The ritual of setting the table calmed me, each placement a small act of control. Then I placed a thick manila folder in the center of the table. Inside were copies of everything Margaret had prepared. The irrevocable trust for Uncle Tommy's estate, the property trust for my house, the new estate plan and Dr. Yamamoto's evaluation. I had also included printouts of the bank statements summarizing Uncle Tommy's properties and their current estimated values. At 6 o'clock sharp, Patricia arrived. She stepped inside, took one look at the set table and squeezed my hand. You sure about this? She whispered as I helped her hang her jacket. No, I admitted. But I am doing it anyway. She nodded, eyes full of compassion and steel. We sat in the living room together, waiting, listening to the ticking of the wall clock. At 6:20 the front door opened. Amanda and Derek came in carrying shopping bags, their faces flushed from the heat outside. They stopped short when they saw Patricia sitting calmly on my sofa. Patricia? Amanda said, surprised. What are you doing here? Catherine invited me for dinner, Patricia answered, her tone mild. Is that a problem? Her gaze flicked briefly to Derek, then back. No, of course not, Amanda said quickly. We just did not know you were coming. There are a lot of things you do not know, I said, rising from my chair. My voice came out steady and clear in a way that startled even me. Please, both of you, sit down at the table. We need to talk. Something in my tone cut through their confusion. They exchanged a glance, then did as I asked. I remained standing at the head of the table, my hands resting lightly on the back of my chair. The folder sat in front of me like evidence waiting to be introduced. 3 weeks ago, I received a letter from an attorney in Phoenix. He informed me that my Uncle Tommy had passed away, and that he had named me as his sole beneficiary. Amanda's eyes widened slightly. Derek's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I was in shock. I continued. Uncle Tommy was a retired math teacher. I knew he invested in property, but I never knew the extent. The letter estimated the value of his estate at $5.2 million. Can you imagine? Me, a retired elementary school teacher, suddenly wealthy on paper. I swallowed, feeling the familiar ache in my throat. My very first thought was you, Amanda. I wanted to tell you immediately. I was so happy because I could finally help you. Pay off all your debts. Give you and Derek a real fresh start. I walked toward the living room that day to share the good news. Amanda's face had gone pale, her earlier color drained away. But I stopped, I said quietly, because I heard you talking. You and Derek. In this room. Derek shifted in his chair. I do not know what you think you heard, he began, his voice defensive. Sit down, Derek, Patricia said sharply. The authority in her tone made him close his mouth and sink back into his seat. I opened the folder and pulled out the first document. I heard you planning to sell my house, I said, looking directly at my daughter. To place me in Desert Vista Senior Community. To petition for guardianship so I could not object. I heard you discuss it like I was already gone. Like I was just an obstacle between you and the life you thought you deserved. My voice shook, but I did not look away. Mom, Amanda whispered, tears already forming. Do you have any idea, I pressed on, what it feels like to hear your only child, the person you carried and fed and taught and protected, plan to strip away your freedom? To listen to you discuss my future, as though I were a piece of furniture to be moved? Tears slid down my cheeks unchecked, but I made no move to wipe them. It was not like that, Amanda said desperately. You do not understand the pressure we were under. Then help me understand, I said, my voice rising. Explain how exactly it was not what I heard. Explain why you were talking about doctors and medications and lawyers, and how to convince a judge I could not make my own decisions. I pulled out another paper from the folder and slid it across the table. This is a medical evaluation from Dr. Robert Yamamoto, a geriatric specialist, I said. Dated last week. It states that I am fully competent, with superior cognitive function for my age, and no sign of any condition that would impair my judgment. There is no legitimate justification for guardianship. None. I took out the trust documents next. This is the irrevocable trust that holds Uncle Tommy's estate, I said. Every property, every account, every asset is in here. You cannot touch it. Ever. There is no way for you to force a sale or redirect the funds. If you tried, the courts would protect the trust, not your wishes. The legal language had become a strange kind of comfort to me. Another document followed. This is the deed transfer placing this house into a property trust. As of last Tuesday, it is no longer in my personal name. You cannot sell it. You cannot borrow against it. You cannot force me out and claim the proceeds. This house is as protected from you as if it were already owned by someone else entirely. The words felt harsh, but they were the truth. And this, I said finally, pulling out the last document, is my new estate plan. You are no longer my beneficiary, Amanda. When I die, everything I own will go to educational charities, scholarship funds in Uncle Tommy S. and Stephen S. names, literacy programs. You get nothing. I said the words slowly, making sure I felt each one as it left my mouth. Silence settled over the table like a heavy blanket. Amanda stared at the papers, her face crumpling. Derek's expression shifted from anger to something like calculation, then to sullenness. He pushed back his chair and stood abruptly. This is insane, he said. You punishing us for trying to help you. We were looking out for your future. Help me. I repeated, my voice cold. Is that what you call planning to have me declared incompetent behind my back? Because you alone, he shot back. You will need care eventually. We were trying to be proactive to make sure you had a safe place before something happened. His words sounded almost convincing, as long as you ignored everything underneath them. Do not, Patricia said, standing up now. Do not you dare reframe this as concern. You wanted her house. You wanted her money. You did not want to wait. That is the truth, and we all know it. She faced Derek squarely, unafraid of his glare. He looked from her to me, then back, and for a moment I saw the realization cross his face that there would be no easy way to spin this. He turned to Amanda. Are you going to let them talk to me like this? He demanded. Amanda did not look at him. She had both hands pressed to her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. Mom, she sobbed, voice breaking. Please listen to me. I am so sorry. I was desperate. We were drowning in debt, and Derek kept saying this was the only solution, and I was not thinking about what it would do to you. She dragged in a shaky breath. I was not thinking about anything except getting out from under that weight. I know that does not excuse it. I know it does not make it right. But I need you to know that I see it now. I see how horrible it was. I am so sorry, Mom. The words spilled out in a rush, raw and jagged. If I had heard them weeks earlier, I might have folded. I looked at my daughter, at the woman sitting where the girl I had raised used to sit. You are sorry now, I said quietly. And I believe that. But you were willing to do it, Amanda. You were willing to go to a doctor and let him write lies about me. You were willing to stand in front of a judge and say I was incompetent. You were willing to take my home, and put me somewhere you chose. That willingness is not erased by tears. I thought of all the years behind us. Do you remember, I asked, when you were 9 and you stole $20 from my purse to buy that toy at the mall? Her wet eyes flickered with confusion at the shift. You came to me crying 2 days later, I reminded her. You said you felt terrible. You said you were sorry. Do you remember what I told you? She shook her head slowly. I told you that being sorry mattered, I said. But what mattered more was understanding why what you did was wrong, and making sure you never did it again. I made you go to the store manager and admit what you'd done. I made you work off the money. Not because I wanted to punish you, but because I wanted you to learn what integrity meant. You have hurt me more deeply than I knew was possible, I continued. I loved you more than anything in this world. When your father died and left us with almost nothing, I worked summer school year after year so you could graduate without loans. I drove a car with no air conditioning for 8 years, so you could have something reliable. I ate canned soup so you could have meat on your plate. I would have died for you, Amanda, I said, the truth of it burning in my chest. Happily. Without hesitation. And you. My voice broke. You were willing to throw me away for money. For a house. For a life you thought you deserved more than I deserved my freedom. The room blurred through my tears, but I could still see the shock and shame on her face. Amanda sobbed, shoulders shaking. I know, Mom, she whispered. I know. And I hate myself for it. I think about it every single day. I replay what we said and I see I not believe it came out of my mouth. I was so scared and selfish. I do not expect you to forgive me. I do not know that I deserve that. But please, please tell me there is some way to make this right. Tell me what to do. I will do anything. I stood very still, looking at the child who had once trusted me with every secret, and the adult who had planned to take away my choices. After a long, aching moment, I said the words that had been forming in me since I first called Margaret. I need you to leave, I said. Both of you. I need you out of my house by the end of the month. What? Amanda's voice was so small I barely heard her. I cannot live with you anymore, I said, my tone firm. I cannot sit across from you at breakfast and wonder if you wishing I would just quietly disappear. I cannot walk through these rooms, the ones I worked so hard to keep, and feel like a prisoner in my own home. I cannot do it. I will not do it. Please do not do this, she begged. You did this, I answered. You made this choice when you stood in my living room and planned to take everything from me. This is the consequence of that choice. I turned and walked into the kitchen, opened the drawer where I kept my checkbook, and wrote a check with a hand that did not shake. When I returned, I placed the piece of paper in front of her. This is for $35,000, I said. It will cover your debts and give you a small cushion. It is everything I am willing to give you now. Take it. Use it to rebuild your life. But you will do that rebuilding somewhere else. The numbers on the check looked oddly small compared to the weight of what they represented. Amanda stared at the check as if it were on fire. I do not want your money, Mom, she whispered. I want my mother back. I swallowed hard. You should have thought of that, I said quietly, before you tried to take my life away from me. Patricia's hand found my shoulder then, a steadying presence. In the silence that followed, I felt something inside me tear cleanly, like a fabric finally giving way along a long strained seam. Chapter 6. The desert. The house in Scottsdale was beautiful in a way that surprised me. Uncle Tommy had bought it in 1991, a modest 3-bedroom ranch with a small pool and a yard he had tended like a beloved student. The crepe myrtles along the back fence were heavy with blossoms. At dawn and dusk, hummingbirds flitted among the feeders hung by the previous gardener, their wings a blur of impossible motion. I sold my house in Tucson 3 months after that Sunday evening. Not because I had to. Not because anyone forced me. But because too many ghosts lived there now. The hallway where I had listened to my daughter plan my exile. The kitchen where I had pretended nothing was wrong. The bedroom where I had lain awake night after night, replaying every moment from Amanda's birth to her betrayal. The trusts Margaret had created for me provided more income than I would ever reasonably need. I kept the rental properties in Phoenix, Flagstaff, and Tempe. The revenue they generated funded scholarships in Uncle Tommy's name and in Stephen's. $40,000 a year went to students studying education and engineering, young people who wanted to teach, to build, to contribute something tangible to the world. The money from the sale of my Tucson house went to Patricia and Richard. They protested, of course, saying they were comfortable, that they did not need it. But I insisted. You have been my family when my own family forgot what that word meant, I told them. Let me do this for you. Let me help you enjoy the retirement you earned. Eventually, they accepted with tears and reluctant smiles. Amanda and Derek moved out of my house exactly 2 weeks after the confrontation. Amanda took the check I had given her, paid off every cent of their debt within days, and began looking for an apartment she could afford on her own salary. 2 weeks after that, she filed for divorce. 6 weeks later, Derek left the state entirely. I heard about his departure the way one hears about weather, through casual mentions without details. Amanda called me every Sunday evening at 7 o'clock from the day she left. At first, I let the calls go to voicemail, watching the screen light up and darken while my heart hammered. I would play the messages later, sitting alone in my newly quiet house, listening to her voice through the tiny speaker as though hearing someone from a different lifetime. Mom. It's me, she would say. I just wanted to hear your voice, even if it is only on the recording. I hope you're okay. Please know that I love you. Another week. Mom, I do not expect you to forgive me. I know I do not deserve it. I just need you to know I think about what I did every single day. Keeps me up at night. I'm so sorry. As the weeks went on, her messages began to include small details about her life. I got a new job, she said one Sunday. It's nothing special, just administrative work at a nonprofit that supports after-school programs. But it's honest work. I think Dad would have liked the idea of me helping kids. Her voice always sounded thick with emotion, but she never asked for money, never asked to move back in. For months after I moved to Scottsdale, I answered one of her calls. My finger hovered over the button for a long moment before I pressed it. Hello, Amanda, I said. The silence on the other end stretched just long enough for me to wonder if the call had dropped. Then I heard her inhale sharply. Mom, she said, her voice breaking. I am here. I did not think you would ever pick up. I am not ready to forgive you, I said calmly. The truth of that sat solidly inside me. I do not know if I will ever be ready. I need you to understand that. I know, she whispered. I know, and I do not expect it. Hearing your voice is more than I hoped for. There was a rustling sound like she was wiping her eyes. But I am willing to talk, I continued. Once a week. Sunday evenings. Like Uncle Tommy used to call me. The thought had been in my mind for days, circling like a bird waiting for a safe place to land. We can try to. I do not know. See whether there is anything left to build on. On the other end of the line, Amanda began to cry in earnest. Thank you, she said over and over. Thank you, Mom. I will not waste it. I promise I will not waste this. I listened, letting her words wash over me without trying to force them into any particular meaning. Promises were easy. Time and consistent behavior were harder. But for the first time in months, the possibility of something other than permanent estrangement flickered at the edge of my vision. Now 8 months later, we still spoke every Sunday at 7. The conversations had been stiff and awkward at first, full of long pauses and careful phrases. We talked about neutral things. Her new job, the projects at the nonprofit, the heat in Tucson, the flowers in my Scottsdale garden. We avoided the jagged edges of what had happened, circling them without naming them. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, something began to grow in the space between us. Not trust. I was not ready to offer that, and she was wise enough not to ask. Not forgiveness either. The wound was still too deep, the scar not yet formed. But connection, thin and fragile as a spider's web, stretched between our separate lives, catching small moments of shared understanding. Last Sunday, near the end of our call, Amanda cleared her throat. Mom, she said cautiously, I was wondering, would you ever consider letting me visit? Not now, I mean. No pressure. Just someday. I'd like to see where you reliving. Make sure you re-happy. Put a real place in my mind when we talk. Her voice trembled on the last words. I did not answer immediately. I looked out my window at the fading light over the desert, at the silhouette of a saguaro cactus against the sky. Maybe, I said at last. In a few more months. We'll see how things are then. It was the most honest answer I could give. There were still too many unknowns, too many shifting pieces inside me for anything more concrete. Now I sat in Uncle Tommy's garden, my garden, on a metal chair warmed by the evening sun. The sky was painted in layers of gold and rose and violet, the desert mountains in the distance soft and hazy. A hummingbird hovered near the feeder I had filled that morning, its tiny body suspended in midair, wings a blur of determination and grace. My phone buzzed on the table beside me. A text from Patricia lit up the screen. Thinking of you. How was your week? I smiled and typed back, my week was peaceful. Come visit next month if you can. Her response came almost instantly. Would not miss it for the world. The knowledge that she would soon be here, walking through this garden with me, anchored me in a way few things could. I set my phone down and leaned back, closing my eyes for a moment. I thought about Amanda, about the girl she had been and the woman she was trying to become. I thought about the awful, unerasable fact of what she had been willing to do, and the equally real fact that she was now trying, in her stumbling way, to do something different. I did not know whether complete forgiveness would ever be possible or wise. What I did know was this: I had time. I had peace. I had a house filled with light rather than shadows, a garden where hummingbirds visited each morning, and a bank account that finally felt like a tool for good, rather than a looming question mark. The true inheritance Uncle Tommy had given me was not the properties or the dollar amount. It was the ability to choose my own life again. Somewhere, in whatever quiet place kind souls go when they are done with this world, I like to imagine Uncle Tommy watching, seeing that his careful investments and frugal habits had done more than enrich my bank balance. They had given me back my autonomy, my dignity, and the space to decide what kind of old woman I wanted to be, fearful and controlled or cautious and free. The hummingbird darted away suddenly, a flash of emerald and ruby against the deepening purple of the sky. I opened my eyes and watched it vanish into the dusk. A single tear slipped down my cheek, not from pain this time, but from something softer and more complex that I hesitated to name. I wiped it away with the heel of my hand and stood up, feeling the slight protest of my knees. Tomorrow, I decided I would plant roses along the back fence, the coral-colored kind Stephen used to bring me on our anniversary. Their blooms would be a bridge between past and present, a living memory that did not require me to surrender myself. I smiled at the thought of them, stubborn and beautiful in the desert heat. On Sunday at 7, I would answer the phone when my daughter called. Not because she had earned it yet, not because everything was healed, but because that was the step I was able to take. Because that is what mothers do, even when their hearts are broken. We love. We grieve. We protect ourselves when we must. And sometimes, when we are very fortunate and very brave, we find a way to hope again.